Hello everybody, my name is Lily.
My name is Maria.
My name is Gabby.
And my name is Caitlin. And our presentation is on color learning when foraging for nectar and pollen. Bees learn two colors at once. So something that is well established in the scientific community is how bees respond to learning cues for one reward type in a single context. For example, if a bee can learn to associate a specific flower color with one specific reward. However, how bees learn multiple reward cues in a single context is not well studied. That is something that this experiment attempts to address by determining if bees can learn between two flower colors and associate them with two different rewards at the same time. It would be very beneficial to learn if bees can associate two floral cues with and associate them with pollen and nectar, and be able to differentiate between what flowers offer specifically pollen and what flowers offer specifically nectar. That all this information will greatly increase our knowledge of how bees learn. So this experiment uses the bumblebee species, Bombus impatiens, which is a generalist bee species. Generalist bees are a very good species to work with because they are known to collect pollen and nectar on a wide variety of flowers. Also, generalist bees have been known to form associations between flower colors and rewards. Additionally, generalist bumblebees will collect pollen on some flowers and nectar on other flowers, all during a single foraging trip. And they use different motor routines or behaviors when they collect pollen versus when they collect nectar, so the researchers are easily able to identify if they are collecting pollen or nectar.
I'm going to be talking to you about our species-specific research question. So our question at hand was to see whether bumblebees could form connections between colors and rewards, such as nectar and pollen, when foraging for these specific rewards. And we expected that these bees would attempt to collect the rewards from the previous color associated with it during the trainings. And we also expected that the bees would collect from the color options that were used during training in preference over the new colors that were introduced during testing. So these were, I'm going to give you like an overview of our methods. So what happened first in the experiment was that we trained individual bees using blue and yellow flowers with respective rewards such as nectar and pollen. So as you can see here, this was what the training looked like. There was two different trainings. One where pollen was yellow and nectar was blue, and then when they're switched, pollen was blue and nectar was yellow. So during those two trainings, bees were able to learn the two different colors associated with pollen and nectar. Once the trainings were completed, we then began with a test, and then the test actually looks very similar to this. And in the test, there was no rewards present, and there's now 4 colors instead of 2 colors. So there was blue, yellow, orange, and purple. And basically, they led the bees into these flowers, and they took them out after 10 times, like after they attempted 10 times to collect. That's where the experiment ends. From these recordings, they observed bee behavior to see if they were trying to get nectar or pollen by their motor movement and which flowers they tried to get specific rewards on.
For the major research results, I'm going to tell you guys some of the major research results that was found and then kind of explain the graphs a little bit. So during the training period, 20 of the bees foraged for both the reward types, and then 19 of the bees foraged for only one of the reward types, so either nectar or pollen. Bees were more likely to collect the reward that was on their preferred color. Bees that were more likely to on pollen yellow, nectar blue bees, the performance was the same between those that collected only nectar and then those that collected both. In pollen blue, nectar yellow bees, the ones that collected only pollen made fewer errors than the ones that collected only nectar. Out of the bees that collected both rewards, they made fewer errors after each trial. Pollen yellow, nectar blue bees learned at similar rates for each reward types, whereas pollen blue, nectar yellow bees made fewer errors on the first few trials. And then bees that collected both reward types were more likely to go to those particular colors over the colors that were not trained in the test. So for these two graphs on this one, I just want to show you. So this one is the pollen yellow, nectar blue. As you can see, there is, like, in the graph is increasing, and so it's showing that the bees actually learned, and they were able to specify between the colors. And then here is the same, so it's pollen blue, nectar yellow. Again, you can see the learning. When the colors were added of orange and purple, you can tell that they were able to associate the colors. So the blue and the purple are kind of like similar in height, would you say? As well as the yellow and the orange.
And for our discussion, so one of the big things that our researchers found were that bees will generalize among adjacent colors. And so they will make assumptions about what kind of rewards a plant will have based on the color of its flower. And this can have a number of implications. For one thing they pointed out was that this can cause convergent evolution among plants that have the same kind of rewards, like, say, things that have a lot of nectar might tend to look the same because a bee will increase that plant's fitness because it's attracted to it, and the same thing for plants that are heavy in pollen. And on the other side of the same token, this can also cause divergent evolution because bees might, if they're looking for nectar, they'll go to a plant that might look differently from one when they're trying to look for pollen. And they also found that, as Maria said, specialist bees were more efficient than generalist bees. So bees that only went to pollen or only went to nectar were much more successful and made fewer errors. And they said that this could suggest that there is cognitive constraint among bees. So some bees may specialize in some areas more than others, and this could have impacts on how they drive plant evolution. But they said that more studies would be needed to confirm this. And as for follow-up studies, one thing that I think would be interesting to do, instead of having them being trained and tested in different environments, I want to see them be tested in the same environment, or to be trained and tested in the exact same environment. So I would like them to be trained in an environment that looks like this, and we put rewards in the blue and yellow, except we will leave the orange and purple with no rewards. So in this case, are bees going to still generalize, or will they learn to ignore those rewardless flowers? Another thing we could study is if bees are capable of memorizing shapes. And we already know that bees are able to memorize scents, but are they able to simultaneously memorize scents like they did with color here? And some questions for you. So what do you think about the process of teaching bees? Are there any real-life applications of this, or is it just scientists doing science for the sake of science? And also, how do you create memories as a human? Through sight, through hearing, and whatnot. How do you think bees create memories? How do you think they create memories similarly to the ways we do? How do you think they might create memories differently from us? And any questions? Thank you.